All right, boys, welcome. This is going to be my segment of the stream where I slander The Last of Us. Now, The Last of Us 1, incredible game. Nobody can disagree. One of the greatest games ever made. One of the most important games ever made. One of the most beautiful games ever made, right? The Last of Us 2, dog shit. Look, we can all agree. The Last of Us 2 is mid. It's dog shit. But here's why The Last of Us 2 is mid. You hear everybody fucking people talking about why The Last of Us 2 is bad. And they're all wrong, okay? Look, people gonna, Abby's a terrible character. That is actually false, okay? That is actually false. Abby is not a bad character. Shock, I know. In actuality, Abby is the only good character in the entire game. And every other character must become worse to supplement Abby's character. That's why it pisses me off. Also, the fact that this is The Last of Us 2, okay? The Last of Us 2. I'm here for Joel and Ellie. Now, before The Last of Us 2 ever even came out, I knew Joel was gonna die, okay? If you thought Joel was gonna live for any amount of time in The Last of Us 2, you're on heavy cope, you're a fucking dumbass. You're probably the type of person that likes The Last of Us 2, okay? Listen, The Last of Us 2 was always gonna have Joel die. Like, come on. It's literally free. It's easy. He's gonna get packed up, right? Now, here's another point of contention. People will be like, oh, you're just mad because they killed Joel. Joel wasn't a good guy, you know. Nigga, I know. The beautiful part of The Last of Us 1 is the detail and nuance of the ending. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people could probably see themselves doing something similar in Joel's position. Like, are you strong enough to have what is essentially your daughter, one of the only people in the entire world you love? Are you really a strong enough person to let that person die for the sake of humanity? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. That is the beautiful part of the ending of The Last of Us. And then Joel lying to Ellie at the end of The Last of Us, a perfect ending. So much nuance in that scene. That scene lives in your head rent free, okay? We knew Joel did something extreme. Of course, it having consequences surprises nobody, right? And even still, even while I do think that the death was not handled the best, while I do think it is kind of weird, champ, that Joel, after all these years, would still let down his guard randomly just because he's been happy for a couple years, while I still don't think that makes any fucking sense, that is what happened. And when that happened, ladies and gentlemen, if you're part of the 2 or 4 people that were here when I was doing my Last of Us playthrough, you know what I said. I immediately paused the game after that whole scene happened, and I literally said, I'm not mad at this. Because 1, I knew Joel was gonna die. I knew it was gonna happen. I didn't expect it to happen like this, but I knew it was gonna happen, okay? And 2, I was like, if they kill him in this way, it has to be worth it. And that was the part of The Last of Us 2 that really struck me the wrong way, because I'm playing the whole game, and every few hours or so, or every whatever, the game does something that I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this until I see how this pays off, right? So Joel's death, I'm like, okay, we got the death of Joel, one of the most beloved video game characters of all time. How do you follow up with this? Okay. Now, for the first half of The Last of Us 2, you're playing as Ellie. And again, during my playthrough, I'm tapped in. I think the improvements they made to the gameplay in The Last of Us 2 were giga chat. They were fire, right? Loved it. And I was actually combing through, and I was really enjoying myself playing through The Last of Us 2, okay? And then, of course, it gets to the moment where everything culminates to this one huge, gigantic confrontation with Ellie and Abby, and then cuts to black. And now you're playing as Abby. And I remember being very mad because at that time I was like, look here, look, listen. We just got to this critical moment in the game, and now I'm going back to like some bullshit I don't care about with the character that I actively dislike. This is the problem with The Last of Us 2, is that it switches to making you play a character that it's not that you don't care about this character, it's that you actively hate this character. Because up to the point of this game, mind you, if you got to that point in The Last of Us 2, you're probably like 11, 12 hours deep in this fucking game, okay? And the game has done zero legwork to make you care about Abby, to show you Abby's side of the story, to show you the whole other side of the story. It does nothing other than hard cut, and now you're playing as Abby for whatever fucking dumbass reason. So this, of course, creates a natural disdain and dislike at this moment. Now, there are two ways you can feel about this, because Last of Us 2 is one of the most divisive games ever, because I talked to a couple of my friends that liked The Last of Us 2, and some of them said that forcing you to play as Abby is actually what they like, right? Whereas somebody like me, that is a reason why I hate the game, okay? So you have two different schools of thoughts. It's something that you're either going to love or you're either going to hate. But initially you're going to have that pushback, right? The problem is, and the reason why I don't think that change was worth it, is because not once throughout that entire time playing Abby did I ever warm up to her. Because there was not one thing that like justified Abby's actions. The only moment in the game for Abby's section that is even remotely okay is when Abby was hanging out with Lev, I believe that's the character's name. Is that moment, right? However, now of course this is me personally. Everybody interprets stories differently, but for me, I never got how Lev like just changed Abby's whole fucking life. Like, never understood how Abby just like flips on a dime, right? Because now that Abby met Lev, Abby wants to protect Lev. And to do so, Abby murders everyone she's ever known. Literally, when you're playing as Abby in The Last of Us 2 and you're slitting people's throats, strangling them, shooting them in the fucking head, they're like, Abby, no, how could you do this? And for what? And again, I'm not dumb. I understand that it's meant to mirror Ellie's motherfucking gameplay as well. You know, they're both hell-bent on revenge. They're both doing the whatever. Except here is the fucked up part about this. Abby does not pay for her mistakes as much as Ellie has. And Ellie is the character we love, right? Like, you could talk all day until you're blue in the face about how,
Ellie knew what she was sacrificing when she left homegirl in the fucking kid. Like, she knew what she was sacrificing, blah, blah, blah.
Whatever. But why isn't the same said for Abby? Why does Abby get to leave away scot-free? You guys might say, oh, she lost all her friends at Wolf. You mean the friend she killed? Okay, she lost Owen. Oh shit, whoa, big whoop. Fucking Ellie lost everything. Ellie lost there's no hope for Ellie, okay? And you can say,
oh, you know, that's the point of the story. The point of the story is that sometimes the world is so cruel. The world is so cruel.
Yeah, except if you're Abby, I guess, in which case you get to float off on a fucking boat with Lev now for some fucking dumbass reason. Look, another thing The Last of Us 2 does that actually, I just remember this. All the character deaths are like complete dog shit. First of all, characters die in like 0.2 seconds and then they move on and act like nothing ever happened. Jesse gets packed up, no one gives a fuck. Jesse is the father of the child, and they're just like, Jesse who Megalo? Don't remember that. But again, like, the deaths happen, and then like nobody gives a fuck. They just move on. And then not to mention, Abby fucking cold cocks Tommy in the back of the head. Literally shoots this nigga in the head. And then out of nowhere, he pulls up to to motherfucking Ellie's crib like, yo, so I ate that. What? Bro, I saw Abby cold cock your shit. You got domed, but I guess you ate that? Bro had a fucking purple helmet from Apex? Like, what the fuck? And what's even worse is Tommy. Nigga, the guy who was like, Ellie, you know, you shouldn't, you know, go after this revenge. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, Joel died. That's a little tough, champ, but, you know, you gotta let it go. You know, hatred breeds hatred. Vengeance breeds vengeance. You know, it's never gonna end. He was always the voice of reason. Out of nowhere, bro gets shot in the head, walks up to Ellie and like, Ellie, I didn't know you was a fucking bitch. I'm sorry, I didn't know you was a pussy. You're gonna stay here with this woman raising this baby instead of getting revenge for Joel? I'm sorry, you're a baby back bitch. Joel would be disappointed if he could see you. If Joel could see you right now, he would spit in your face. He'd hate you, Ellie. He'd fucking hate you, darn right he'd hate you. And now Ellie's like, damn, I was just getting over this PTSD, but now my father figure's brother comes to me calling me a bitch. I guess I gotta go pack this dumb bitch Abby up. And then Ellie travels across the country. We're talking hundreds, thousands of miles to go kill this bitch. And throughout that whole time, she is murdering niggas, slaughtering niggas, slitting throats, drowning niggas, bashing niggas' heads in with rocks, shooting niggas. And then right at the final moment where she is about to kill Abby, she gets a flashback to Joel in the house talking about like, you know, I think we can work on our relationship. I'm sorry I lied to you. Maybe we can be Daijo Boo once again, Ellie-chan. And then she's like, you know what? Maybe not. You couldn't get that flashback 17 states ago, nigga? You couldn't have gotten that flashback about 2,000 miles ago? Are you dead ass? Like, what the fuck? The stupidest thing. Did that actually happen? Yes! That actually fucking happened! Like, here's the stupidest fucking thing. Okay, they tell the story to you through the aspect of the flashbacks, right? Okay, so like the information is revealed to you through flashbacks. However, Ellie knows all of this information the whole time, okay? That's one thing you have to think about. So throughout the whole game, like in the beginning, like you sense this little weird champness between Joel and Ellie, right? And then the flashback at the end of the game made it seem like they were all Daijobu. So they had that conversation before, okay? And then in the beginning of The Last of Us 2, Ellie's like a little weird champ towards Joel. Like the flashbacks were the best part of that game, and it had a great story moments and story elements, but the problem is that it feels like Ellie only knows about or remembers these flashbacks when they're revealed to you, the player. The problem is that Ellie should already know all this shit because they're flashbacks. Flashbacks. She should already know all this shit. And it feels like a spit in the face, and it feels like, you know what The Last of Us 2 feels like to me? The Last of Us 2 feels like they wanted to subvert expectations at any cost possible. It kind of reminds me of Game of Thrones. Like towards the end of Game of Thrones, they started doing some stupid fucking shit just so they can say, ha!
Bet you didn't see that coming.
And I feel like The Last of Us 2 does the same thing. And it's so annoying. It would be one thing if this was just some random fucking game they decided to make. But it's a whole other thing when it's a sequel to one of the most beloved games ever made. And speaking of one of the most beloved games ever made, they are remaking The Last of Us 1. And for what reason are they remaking this game, okay? There is zero reason this game needs to exist. Not only are they remaking a game that already holds up really well, not only are they remaking a game that already looks beautiful, runs beautiful, plays beautiful, they're charging you $70 fucking dollars for it, okay? And here's the fucked up part. I don't know if I'm alone on this, okay? I tweeted this out. I said, one thing I don't like about the modern era of video games is how bland shit looks. Games look incredible. We can all agree, games look amazing, right? But I often feel like lighting lacks contrast, lacks personality. You know, I feel like a lot of the times we end up sacrificing style in these games for like this air of realism that I think just does not look as interesting to me. And this was showcased to me and like sort of proven to me when they did this side by side. Okay, when you look at this, technically speaking, graphically speaking, yeah, The Last of Us Part 1 graphically looks better, but The Last of Us Remastered looks much more interesting and dynamic to me. Look at how punchy and contrasty this is. It really sets the mood for this scene, whereas The Last of Us Part 1 looks hazy by comparison. It looked like, yeah, it looks good, but it also looks flat. It also is like lacking it's lacking some sort of dynamics to the look of the game. And furthermore, this is something I said even the first time I played The Last of Us 2. When they did flashbacks of The Last of Us 2 and redid Ellie's model, I thought it looked worse. Like, of course it looks better, but I thought it looked worse. I think the model for Ellie got worse. Unironically, I think that. I think Joel's model also got worse. One thing I will credit them about The Last of Us Part 1 is that I think in The Last of Us Part 1, Joel does look much older. I'll give them that. I feel like in the original Last of Us, Joel could have passed for like maybe 10 years younger than he's supposed to be, right? He does look much older. And maybe this is me being a little bit biased because like these are the characters that I grew to love over the years. You know, this game came out in 2013 and this is how they always looked to me and always looked to my head. So again, it could potentially be some bias, but I genuinely believe that the models of the characters are worse. Now, that's not to say that The Last of Us Part 1 is all bad, because one good thing they're doing for The Last of Us Part 1 is they're giving it the gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2. And I think that's huge, because I think The Last of Us Part 2 genuinely had some pretty good and engaging gameplay, whereas The Last of Us, the original, it wasn't very fun to play. I feel like The Last of Us 2 is a lot more fun. So that's a great addition to the game. But again, is it $70? Good. You know, this game already runs great. It already looks great. There's no need for The Last of Us Part 1 to exist. And I think everybody will agree that there's no need for this game to be remade, right? I think we all agree with that. But here's one thing. Here's one thing that I am actually very scared of for The Last of Us Part 1. And I think if they do this, I think it's low-key them self-reporting that The Last of Us 2 is dog shit. And again, this is like a catch-22 situation. If they change the story or the plot of The Last of Us Part 1 to more so fall in line with The Last of Us Part 2, not only do I think that's an admission of The Last of Us Part 2 not really being the narrative masterpiece that motherfuckers call it. If you have to like retcon shit from the first game to make the second game seem better, then I think that's kind of an admission that it's trash. But then again, I also feel like if they don't add anything, this shit has even less reason to exist. In theory, this game should not exist at all. Like, The Last of Us Part 1 should not have been made. So I'm scared that they're gonna throw in maybe now you learn a little bit more about the doctors, or maybe they change the last scene, because in The Last of Us Remastered, Joel slaughtered everyone. All them niggas died, right? All of them did, right? So the fact that they had like a doctor left over, something like kind of like makes no sense, because Joel literally packed them all up type beat. But you know, maybe in the last scene, Joel packs up the doctor, and then they show the scene of Abby coming in like, oh no, Dad, Papa John, I can't believe you got packed up. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe they throw that in there, right? But again, I feel like, to me, that just proves that they made The Last of Us 1 and they never planned on this sequel, right? Because what would have actually been good storytelling, right, is if you showcased some of that setup for the part 2 in the first game. Like maybe you show like even if it's an after credit scene or something, like Abby like pulling up to the hospital, like damn, like everybody got packed up. Or maybe you show Wolf being created in some way, or maybe you show some sort of ramification there, but you didn't, right? Instead, The Last of Us 1, and I think The Last of Us 1 is a better game for it, right? I think The Last of Us 1 ends perfectly. Like, I think The Last of Us 1 ends so perfectly, you don't need a sequel. Like, that ambiguity at the end is so beautifully detailed. You don't need anything else. I think it just ends in a perfect way, right? And if you were to make a sequel, I feel like you do go into pretty much what the flashbacks went into about Ellie finding out that Joel lied and like coming to terms with that. Like, I think that could have been much more interesting. In fact, I think The Last of Us 2 would have been much more interesting if they explored that more. And then maybe at the end of that game, Joel dies in a similar way that he does in The Last of Us Part 2 in that beginning sequence. And then there's like a Last of Us Part 3 that's like the Abby versus Ellie thing. I think that would have driven it home way more. And I think if they also did proper setup for Abby's character and for the Wolf organization as a whole, I think that would have also been a lot easier to swallow, and people wouldn't have been so against Abby's inclusion in The Last of Us Part 2. Again, I'm not really against Abby's inclusion. As I've said in this video, I think Abby is the best character in The Last of Us Part 2. But my problem with that is that every other character seems just complete dog shit in comparison. And in fact, it feels like every character is in service of Abby. It really feels like they're forcing Abby down your throat. And I think that's why a lot of people sort of naturally reject Abby and naturally reject The Last of Us Part 2. For everything I hate about The Last of Us Part 2, I will give it some amount of credit in the fact that doing what they did is ballsy, okay? But just because something ballsy, it doesn't make it good. And in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, you can like The Last of Us 2 all you want, but in my opinion, I think it makes The Last of Us 2 a much worse game for trying to be that ballsy. Now, is that to say they should have went with the formulaic sequel like how all games do? No. And in fact, you know, if Naughty Dog wants to take risks, if Naughty Dog wants to do, you know, crazy shit like that, more power to them. It's their franchise, it's their characters, they can do whatever they want with their characters. But in the same way that they can do whatever they want with their characters, I can feel whatever way I want about their characters. And I feel like The Last of Us Part 2 ruined Ellie's character. It ruined Joel's character. It ruined the fuck out of Tommy. And every other new character that got introduced was pretty much killed off. So, like, what the fuck? Like, maybe it could have been better if they, like, did, like, you know how the game is split up into days? Maybe they did an Ellie day and then right after that an Abby day, just to make the pacing a little bit better. Because the pacing getting halted right at the middle point of the game, right at the climax, and then sort of gets reset to this boring shit you don't care about, that's probably the worst thing they've ever done. And that's not to say that Abby's section in general is bad. Like, that section where Abby's riding the horse through like that burning fucking town, probably one of the best moments in the game, if I'm gonna be honest. Like, technically speaking, that shit was beautiful. The set piece was amazing in that. I thought it was really good, but that is the only highlight of that. I think another part that, like, I didn't really like, but I can sort of respect, is when you're playing as Abby fighting Ellie. You know, I feel like everybody, once they got to that moment, they let Abby die a few times. I feel like everyone did that, right? And nobody wanted to do that. I think that drives home the point that a lot of people try to give Naughty Dog for this game, about them wanting to make you uncomfortable and wanting to put you in shoes you don't want to be in. I think that expressed it pretty well. The whole playing as Abby for 12 hours thing, I didn't like that nearly as much. But yeah, I mean, The Last of Us 2, you know, I have my qualms with that. And The Last of Us Part 1, you know, I definitely have issues with it as well. And, you know, I just kind of wish that The Last of Us Part 1, or The Last of Us in general, could have just been The Last of Us. You know, like, they didn't need to franchise this thing out. And now, you know, you get an HBO series, you're getting a remake of the game. And I get why, you know, the remake, to capitalize on the fans of the show that they might accrue on HBO, to then go ahead and check out The Last of Us Part 1 or whatever. And I understand, I get it from a business standpoint. But from an artistic standpoint, I just feel like it's regressive. And, you know, maybe The Last of Us Part 1 is just a faithful remake, in which case, you know, that'll be interesting. I still think it looks a lot less interesting than remaster does, but, you know, that'd be one thing. And, you know, maybe in a few years down the line when the game is on sale for like $5 on PSN or something, you know, I'll pick it up. And if I ever feel like playing The Last of Us Part 1, replaying The Last of Us Part 1 with The Last of Us Part 2's gameplay would actually be pretty cool. But other than that, I'm not excited for this Last of Us Part 1. And I think, you know, I've said my part on The Last of Us Part 2.
The Last of Us is about these two characters.